This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. And this week's guest makes me just want to have fun. No, it's not Cyndi Lauper, but he did play with her for years. Welcome multi-instrumentalist Knox Chandler to the show. He moved around quite a lot as a kid, so music really meant a lot to him. In fact, his parents told him that he used to hug the stereo speakers when he was a toddler. He studied guitar and upright bass in college, but his cello playing has gotten him just as much work as anything else. And the funny part about that is he never technically learned how to formally play the cello. It began on a whim from Richard Butler of the Psychedelic Furs. From that, we'll call it a suggestion, Knox learned how to play the cello night after night live in front of thousands of Psychedelic Furs fans. That turned into playing for R.E.M. on Automatic for the People, among other amazing credits. Knox also tells a hilarious story about how he met Cyndi Lauper in the studio and then got heckled by her at a live show that same night. He's got a bunch of projects in the works and one that he just completed. It's his multimedia release called The Sound. It's a beautiful instrumental album that was inspired by Friends, tech, and fly fishing. Check it out on all the streaming platforms or buy the multimedia version from knoxchandlermusic.com or Bandcamp. His website also has links to all his socials. Follow us at Performance ANX on socials. Buy merch at performanceanx.threadless.com. Send money through ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. And here's Knox Chandler on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
How do you want me to do the intro? Okay. No, it's all right. Hi, I'm Knox Chandler, and I'm here promoting my release of The Sound, which comes out May 30th, and having a grand old chat with Mark here. And this is performance anxiety. And why don't I feel anxious? I don't know. You sure? I kind of had to look over to make sure I had the right title. All right, good. Hello.
Hey, Knox, how you doing?
How are you doing?
Good. Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Awesome, and thank you for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
Now, where are you?
I'm in Winchester, Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Home of Patsy.
So how's the weather down there been?
Oh, it's getting warm. Pretty rainy recently, actually, so mowing the yard time.
Yeah, it's been raining a lot here, but today was a beautiful day.
Oh, nice. And you're up in Connecticut?
Yeah, Connecticut. It's in the shoreline area.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I kind of like to start things by beginning at the beginning and finding out a little bit about how you got into music in the first place. Like, was music a big presence in the house growing up? Were your parents into it? Were there any musicians in the family prior to you?
There was always music in the house, and so it was. My parents told me that they would listen to Petrushka or Rites of Spring or some of Stravinsky's work. They're into that, and I would just go over and hug the speaker. But my mother would sing and play the Appalachian dulcimer. My father would play a little guitar, and they would harmonize folk songs. And they were very much into the Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan, and my father was in a bunch of bluegrass, and my mother was into Gene Ritchie, who is Appalachian artist, and so there was always music going on. And when we were very young, it wasn't like, do you want to play an instrument? The question was, what instrument do you want to play?
Oh, excellent.
And so when I was, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5, I was taking recorder lessons. And then when I was about 7 or 8, when I was walking out of a lesson in this church in New Haven, and I heard this classical guitarist practicing in the hall there, and it just sounded so amazing. And my mother walked right up to him and said, "Hey, do you give lessons?"
Oh, wow.
And so I studied classical for a couple of years until I got kidnapped by the electric guitar.
Yeah. So was guitar the only lesson you took formal training on?
No, I had formal training on upright bass.
Okay. So
that wasn't until college.
Okay, so recorder, guitar, and bass.
Yeah.
When did you start playing with other people? I mean, were you playing in school bands, or were you picking up other people to play with after lessons?
Yeah, I was picking up other people to play with around town. I mean, I had a couple friends both played bass, and we'd find these different drummers, and we'd jam and try to cop songs. We had a couple bands we had. I remember playing the high school talent show, and it was sort of in style, to have a band,
Yeah.
Not a lot of people around here, but we found people. Then I was going into New Haven and Hamden and North Haven, areas close to here to meet other musicians and play with them.
When, I guess maybe, how old were you when you started really playing out with other people?
My first gig actually was when I was 11 years old.
Oh,
there was this like hippie coffee shop on the Green called Chimo's, and this buddy of mine, Jamie McGann, and I went down there and played at Chimo's a couple times, and we would do coming into Los Angeles, and some of the up on Cripple Creek was one of them, and then I would play the stars, as Jimmy would call it, the Star Strangled Banana. Yeah. And these were all people that were like at least 7-8 years older than us, and they were very very sweet because we really were bad. I wasn't really like, we would play parties, we'd do stuff like that. I guess my first proper gigs were really happening about the time when I was in college.
Was there a moment when you realized that music was what you were going to do?
Very, very early age.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no question about it.
So it's something you always just kind of knew. There wasn't really an aha moment. It's just always there.
No. It was, for me, it was an escape at an early age. And that was like a place where I just felt, safe. And so when I actually became aware that people did it for a living, which was very young, there's no question about it. This is what I'll do.
So you went off to study after high school. So were you focusing on guitar at that point?
At that point, I went into school to focusing on guitar. It was Bard College in 1976. And at that time, there was an improviser named Roswell Rudd. He played trombone, who was teaching there. And I wanted to study with him. But when I got there, he had left.
Oh.
Which was bad in some ways, but good in other ways, because with that money, they just hired all these different musicians who were coming up state New York, mostly to head over to Carl Berger's school, CMS, which was over in the Woodstock area.
Okay.
And so I was taking workshops like with different musicians, composers. Like every week, it was a different somebody. So,
nice.
I mean, like Carla Bley, Ken McIntyre, Leroy Jenkins were some of them, and so. That was exciting because you're getting people who are really out there working, and this was just like a stopover for them on their way to get to Woodstock.
Oh wow!
And then I was also studying like more classical music with composer Joan Tower and Luis Garcia Renart. So it was a good mixture of different genres, and at the same time, in the beginning, I was a split major. I was also studying art. But by the time I hit my sophomore year, I started upright bass, and probably more of my focus was on upright bass from my sophomore year to senior year, upright bass and composition.
What made you switch to upright bass or focus on it, I guess?
Well, they encouraged us to find a second instrument, and there are a lot of guitar players.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was listening to a lot more of the loft jazz that was going on, and the upright, and I wasn't. There were some guitarists who were more crossing over, like Pete Cozy and John McLaughlin. A lot of the guitarists that came out of Miles's camp,
Right?
And then I found I loved them, but they were looking to find people who could do more ensemble work. And I don't know, the upright just really spoke to me, and plus they really could use one in their orchestra. So yeah, I mean, it was a no-brainer for me.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. How soon after you finished school did you move to New York? I mean, I know there was you ended up going to New York City to work, but was it right after, or was there a little bit of a gap?
Well, let's see. I graduated. I thought I was going to start over in Boston.
Oh, okay.
And I went to Boston, and I would do some sessions at New England Conservatory and at Berkeley, and I had a couple bands I played in, and I just wasn't happy there. It just wasn't really great. So I moved back up to the Bard College area because I had a couple bands I was working with up there that were my own.
Okay.
And so those guys sort of convinced me, well, come back up here and we'll get it together and we'll bring it down to New York. And so I wound up teaching guitar, and I got hired by the dance department at Bard College to do accompaniments during their dance classes.
Oh, cool.
And it wasn't until actually this woman, Eileen Pasloff, she was one of the professors there who was, post Cunningham and had real connections in the city. She brought a show of the students down to New York to perform at Theater for the New City. And she put me on stage with them, bowing cymbals and playing the bass and pouring water. And she really was into this sort of interaction with the music and the dancers. It was very modern dance, and really, really interesting stuff. And so I wound up being down there for about 2 weeks doing rehearsals and the performances. And that's when after that was over, I sold everything I had, sold my car, and I moved to New York City.
Oh, wow. So that sounds like it was some pretty experimental avant-garde music. Was that something that you were into before that, or was that what kind of got you into that type of music? I got into a bit of that studying at Bard.
Okay. Yeah. 12-tone contemporary music, improvisation stuff. It's more experimental stuff. It's always caught my ear, especially with the upright bass. I mean, it's just a wide range of sounds and registers, and it's just I fell in love with it there. I thought I was going to go to New York, and that's what I was going to do, and. I knew some guys there who needed a guitar player. And even prior to that, I had been playing guitar on these guys were putting out 45 punk bands.
Right, yeah.
And because I could play the guitar, I was like their ghost guitar player. And but I really wasn't interested that much in the music of just straight punk. But I found I was really interested in some of the sort of the crossover stuff that was happening in the city, like James White and the Blacks, and the Bush Tetras, the Contortions, and Rip Rig, and there were some downtown no wave bands like Rip Rig and Panic. And so it was like at that time it was a real melting pot in New York City. I mean, the styles just sort of like it was a nice soup.
Yeah.
And I was living in the East Village, paying hardly anything for this apartment, and I could live on like $3 a day.
Oh man!
And it was like, but no one wanted to live there because it was so dangerous.
I've had a couple of people from that era, New York City around that era, like Wharton Tears and Michael Giron. That's what they said. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I know both those guys. I've worked with both of them. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we have Michael had his studio right down the street from me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Horton was on 14th Street. Yeah.
Man, I love hearing about the different scenes and And how diverse they actually were, because you hear about.
Well, it was because it really was inexpensive to live. It was like a lot of people, a lot of artists pioneered the area. They were like, I knew people who were buying their apartments for $1. These like burnout buildings, and. It was really corrupt. It was run down. There are tons of like places to play, and there was all this wild influence from Latin and pre-hip hop to like jazz and punk, and it all just sort of disco, and all just sort of mixed together and with these different bands. And the thing was, because it was so inexpensive, you could do like, I think, Steve Buscemi was the bartender at the Horseshoe Bar, which was on 8th and B. Wow. And he could do like, a couple nights a week, and that would give him enough money to write scripts and go on auditions the rest of the time. And that's what it was like for all of us. We didn't really have to make a lot of money to be there. And because of it, we could do exactly what we wanted to do. And that was what it was like when I moved to Berlin. Right when I got there, it was the same thing. Tons of places to play, a lot of people doing very interesting experimental stuff, and you didn't have to pay a fortune to live. I think it's changed a bit now, but that's what happens. It's like then things become hip, and then everyone moves there and starts buying stuff, and the next thing you know, the flavor gets taken out. Because a lot of that flavor comes from just people who are just wanting to do what they want to do. They're hearing something, seeing something, feeling something, and they can express it without having to worry how to pay rent. Yeah,
exactly. It's an amazing atmosphere, I guess, in which to create music and all kinds of art. It's amazing. Yeah. You ended up getting pulled into the pop and rock world. How did and playing with bands like Psychedelic Furs? How did you get pulled in away from what you wanted to do and into rock and pop?
Well, I always loved rock music. I always thought of the guitar as a rock instrument more so than like a jazz instrument. And I had confidence in it. There were some people I knew in the city who needed guitar players, and sometimes I'd play some bass, but mostly it was guitar. And I just sort of went from playing with a bunch of different groups. I mean, I had these straight jobs to supplement my living, and then I'd spend my nights rehearsing and gigging. And there was a band called the Swollen Monkeys that Hal Wilner produced their records, and those guys were at Creative Music Studios, including Mars Williams was one of the members.
Oh, okay.
And I knew those guys from going to Bard, because I used to go over there, and they used to come over to Bard, and I was playing with them a little bit, and I wound up doing some gigs with them, a little bit of touring with them, and then. Through that scene, there were some spin-offs of that band, which I wound up working with. There's a trumpet player named Dave Buck, who I did a lot of stuff with, who was playing with the B-52s at the time.
Oh, okay.
A lot of those guys wound up playing with different bands. Mars went on to do the Waitresses and the Psychedelic Furs. Dan Clayman did the Waitresses, and then Ralph Carney did the B-52s, and so there was a lot of networking like that.
Okay.
And one of the thing about the Swollen Monkeys was they were a large band, and they were like these peripheral members who would just Mark Kramer was one of them, and he would go in and start throwing cassette loops into machines and processing it. It was the greatest. Before samplers, it was amazing.
Oh, wow.
Tom Corral on cello. And there was this guy, Gary Window, the sax player, a British sax player who played with Robert Wyatt, Brotherhood of Breath, Carla Bley. And I would go see him play, and I always just thought he was the greatest horn player ever. And he just had a sound that I just absolutely loved. As a matter of fact, I would try to cop his sound on the guitar.
Oh, wow.
He would make it sound like he was flushing a toilet. It was just brilliant. And so I was doing one of these gigs with Dave Buck, one of these spin-off gigs in the East Village, and this guy comes up to me during the break and says, "Man, you play guitar like I play saxophone. We got to start a band together." And I didn't recognize him because, Gary had this like bushy beard and these little dark glasses and, and this guy had like blonde hair, slicked back, clean shaven, wearing a sharkskin suit. And I was like, who the hell are you? And he's like, I'm Gary Window. And I was like, no, you're not. He goes, yeah, mate, I am. And I was just like, oh my God. I mean, I kind of sort of died and went to heaven. It was like, this guy gets me. And,
awesome.
And so I started working with him pretty much exclusively. Then we made that record Deepwater that came out on Antilles Island, went into Bearsville back when Albert Grossman was alive. He put us in there.
Oh, wow.
And it was and that was instrumental. There was Gary sang a little bit, but it was like fusing like some of the heavier rock stuff that was going on with some bebop, and like we did a version of the Take the A Train and some Brotherhood of Breath stuff and Albert Eiler stuff. And he had played on he worked a lot with Todd Rundgren. I was good friends with Todd Rundgren, who had a studio up there.
Yeah.
And he had played, and I think Todd brought him in on the Forever Now album, Psychedelic Furs Forever Now album.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so I pretty early on met the guys from the Furs, especially John Ashton, who was good friends with Gary. So every time they were in town, we would hang out. And so I became friends with John. And, fast forward, I just bumped into Richard and Tim one day in Soho walking around, and Richard hired me to play on some demos for a solo record, which later became the Book of Days record by the Furs.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of how it happened. It was sort of, one thing just led into another. That's been my whole career.
Yeah. Oh, which kind of is how you started playing cello too, I believe, isn't it?
That's Richard Butler's fault. Blame him. No, we had cut the Book of Days record in London, and there was one song called Torch on it that he brought in a cellist to play on. This woman, really great cellist, I forget her name. And the other thing was, back in the Forever Now days, they were using a woman cellist named Ann Sheldon.
Okay.
Who wound up working with the Gary Window Band and actually passed away in a bad car accident on the way to one of our gigs, a New Year's Eve gig.
Oh my God.
So he was over. We were getting ready to start rehearsals, and he was over my apartment, and he was just like, hey, Knox, you can play the cello. And I'm like, I don't play the cello, Gary. Richard. I don't play the cello. He goes, yeah, but you could. And I said, this isn't like all of us sitting around the bar and you play bass and you play guitar and you play drums. No. Right. I said, it's I played upright bass, yes, but I was using German bow, not French, and it's tuned differently and it's different fingerings, completely different fingerings. And he talked me into it. So I went and I got this cello that my sister had left at this house, actually, and I needed some work, so I put some work into it, fixed it up, and put a pickup on it, and I just practiced for like a couple weeks or so, and then went into rehearsals, and they didn't say no, and actually I feel like I wound up learning the instrument in front of several thousand fans a night, and it was really stressful. But I was able to get around it, and I've seen some of that stuff online, and I was like, it's not as bad as I remember it being.
Yeah.
And that just sort of that whole part of my life sort of snowballed too. At what points I've been very frustrated with the instrument. I never took proper lessons. I really just immediately had to make it my own for it to work. And I was able to get a sound out of it. And plus, I really like processing it, doing stuff with processing, pitching, the whole thing. And and so by the time we did the World Outside record, I was more involved in processing it with the 2290, and Stephen Street was working on that record. So we would spend time in the studio messing around with the things that you could do with the instrument with the 2290. But it had a sort of thing about it, which was, very, very similar to the upright bass, where the graininess of the bow, the horsehair, and the rosin against the string kind of created this sort of natural distortion, almost gave it a breath sound, which I really enjoyed. And so I've had this like really weird love-hate relationship with it. And since then, at one point I just thought I'd give it up completely when I moved to Berlin.
Oh, really?
And then I brought it over there. Then I wanted doing some stuff there with it, which I'm glad I did. But even these days, I go into New Haven a couple times a month and play it with the New Haven Improvisers Collective, and I get such enjoyment out of it.
That's incredible. I was looking at some of your credits here, and you ended up playing cello on R.E.M's "Automatic for the People" on a couple of songs. How did that happen?
Well, Richard and I were pretty close, and he was going down to Athens, Georgia, to work with Peter Buck on Pink Moon, the Nick Drake song, for some compilation record. And he asked me to come along, and I met Peter from touring down there, and he's a great guy. And I knew the town, I knew the scene, and I was like, yeah, this will be fantastic. So we drove down. Which was kind of fun. Richard and his girlfriend Annie at the time, who later became his wife, and it was just a fun trip. It was like like almost like a vacation, getting out of the city. And I was playing cello. And Peter was playing guitar, and I think his name was John Dean. It was his studio, and he was playing pedal steel. And we come up with this great arrangement. Richard pretty much directed me what to do on the cello. He would sing me some stuff, and I'd try to cop it. And anyway, it came back, and maybe about 4 to 6 months later, Peter called me up, and he said, "Yeah, that cello part you played on Pink Moon inspired me to write this song, which was Sweetness Follows."
Oh, wow!
And we want to hire you to come up to Bearsville, spend a couple of days doing some overdubs, and then possibly have you come down to Atlanta to play with the orchestra with John Paul Jones.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, Peter, I'm not a cellist. I can read on the bass, but I can't read on the cello. Oh. And he goes, that's what I really like about you. I like the fact that you're a rock guy. You can play in a studio, But anyway. Oh, God. So I went up. I did the Bearsville thing. Where I played on Sweetness Follows and Monty's Got a Raw Deal. It's been a couple of days on that, doing some experimental show. Monty's Got a Raw Deal is a little more experimental.
Yeah.
But the line on Sweetness Follows was it was very, very simple.
Ready and to bury your father and your mother. What did you think when you lost another? I used to wonder, why did you bother? Distance from one to the other.
And the funny thing about it, because I was just not really that good at the cello, it was because I had to press down like where the first fret would really be if there was a fret on it. Mm-hmm. I had to hold that down, just continue and do this one thing over and over again. My fingers completely gave out. So we got a garbage tie. We used it like a capo.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the funny thing about it was, all of a sudden in the mail, I get this triple platinum album thing, that people put up on their walls.
Yeah.
And I never got anything close to it for playing guitar.
Oh, wow.
So, and then they go on MTV and start saying, "Oh, and guest appearance by cellist Knox Chandler from the Psychedelic Furs." And then I started getting all these phone calls.
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Well, I can do this one thing on the cello, which is, but if you want a real cellist, here's James Scarpantoni's number." But I wanted to doing a lot of different stuff on the cello, and and of course, by the time I got to working with Dave Gahan on Paper Monsters, I was playing some cello on that, doing string arrangements. And that led to this string arrangement with Depeche Mode and electric cello. I played on that record, and then Cyndi Lauper used me a lot on cello.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, I was looking. So from '94 through like the 2000s, I mean, you seem to be incredibly busy.
Yeah, there was one year where it was a couple of years actually, where I was working with Cindy, Susie and the Banshees, and Dave Gahan all at the same time.
Oh my gosh!
And I just remember this one morning I woke up and I didn't know what country I was in, and I didn't know who I was playing with.
Oh my god!
And I mean, it took me a couple minutes to realize, well, this isn't like the hotels that I stay in with David, so it's not him. And then it would come to me, oh yeah, it's a sin thing, yeah. So
wow. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
But it was wonderful. I like being that busy, and it keeps you on your toes. And
you had looked like about as many credits for cello as you did guitar during that time period.
I don't know. Maybe it could be.
I mean, you mentioned Dave Gahan and Cyndi Lauper, Susie, Paula Cole in there. What ended up, Psychedelic Furs become, the offshoot Love Spit Love, which I loved. I thought that was amazing. And then looks like you did some more like experimentally kind of a thing with the Golden Palominos.
Oh yeah, with Anton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did 2 records with Anton, and Dead Inside was a very, I think it's a great record.
Slow, slow, quick, slow. Ride, slow, slow, quick, slow. Ride. At any moment.
Yeah. It's got Bill Laswell and Bootsy's on there, and Nikki Scopolidis, and Nicole Blackman doing the spoken word stuff. Yeah, Anton was, he passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
But he was a really interesting character. Really tough guy.
Oh yeah.
Like a lot of those sessions wouldn't start until like 11 at night.
Oh. And
it was at Bill Laswell's studio, and we would go on into the mornings, and some of them were really brutal.
Oh.
But I have to say, I mean, Anton really got stuff out of me that I just wouldn't ever be able to get to on my own.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
amazing. he got some really interesting stuff out of me, and really guided me in a way where I could find another layer of my autonomy. Oh, wow. He was a tough character. tough to work with, but I respect it, and I'm very grateful for working with him. I mean, he really, out of all the producers, he really pushed me, and I wound up playing on a whole bunch of stuff that he was producing.
Oh yeah,
I was sort of his go-to guy for a few years there.
With that, and with your later stuff, you've kind of done an amazing job of merging technology into your music. Was that something that you've always been interested in, or is that something that came in later?
Absolutely. I mean, Axis Bold as Love, Electric Ladyland, all the Hendrix stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, the stuff that I loved about Hendrix wasn't so much the playing stuff, which I did. I absolutely loved it. But it was the sounds he was getting, like the feedback and the way he manipulated tape and like even plugging into the wah-wah pedal the wrong way around to get these seagull sounds, which really sort of mimic Chris Wood's flutes, So that stuff really interested me. So when I was about 10 years old, but my folks didn't have any money. My father was a scientist. We were living on grants, and he had 4 kids. I was the eldest, but he moved to Guilford from New Haven, and we moved around a lot prior to that. Like we moved probably about a dozen times. By the time I was, probably about 10 times by the time I was 13.
Oh my gosh!
So we wound up in Guilford, and I had chickens. I raised chickens for their eggs. And we had sheep, and my father was into gardening, and we had geese. And I wound up selling these chicken eggs, which to his cronies at Yale, and made enough money to buy my first electric guitar, which was a pre-CBS Fender Mustang.
Oh, nice!
And he set me up with a Bogan PA head and a 15-inch speaker that he was using as a stereo at the time. And I would just sit there and just feedback. I mean, that's what I did. I just feedbacked. Then I got a wah-wah pedal, which was a big thing eventually. And I also built this ham radio, this Heathkit ham radio. Oh, wow. And I would figure out how I could plug that into the wah-wah pedal and play around with the channels. And so I was really into that stuff. He bought a Tandberg reel-to-reel tape machine, which had this whole sound-on-sound echo function in it. And I would just spend hours making these tapes, and because honestly, there's nothing else to do around here.
Oh, really?
There's nothing else to do other than drugs and drink and just immerse myself into making these tapes.
Oh man, oh gosh! I love how that came early on. I'm like you. My favorite stuff is these songs with these amazing swells of feedback. Hendrix, like I love Smashing Pumpkins. They did an amazing job of using that as well. And that's exactly my wheelhouse. That's the kind of stuff that I love listening to.
I don't know. I blame it on the drugs.
Yeah.
but actually, a lot of it came before I was even doing drugs. But once I found the drugs, it was like endless.
Now you realized why you liked it. You end up moving to Berlin. What was the reason for that? Okay.
I mean, I'd come to the end of. It was like this was like about 2012. So by 2010, 11, I pretty much come to the end of my working with Cyndi.
Okay.
And she had kept me really busy probably the 2 or 3 years before that. There was a release of Bring You to the Brink album that we recorded, and then it was just lots of touring. Then she started doing the True Colors tours, and it was pretty busy with her.
Yeah.
And then that ended. She went off and did the blues thing, and I was like twiddling my thumbs, and I got on doing a movie. It was Greetings from Tim Buckley, the story behind Jeff Buckley moving to New York.
Yeah, yeah.
And I worked on that quite a bit, and I did some scoring for independent films. And this all comes on the heels of Cyndi, and also I've been out doing the Susie and the Dream Show tour.
Okay.
which was a very, very interesting tour. It was an interesting collection of musicians, which wound up finishing in London, doing a DVD with the Millennium Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
2 nights at Festival Hall, Royal Festival Hall. So it all kind of wound down, and I wasn't happy where I was living at that time. I had separated from my wife, and I was living out in Brooklyn, and it was a nice apartment, but it was really noisy from the kids who lived upstairs. And it was awful trying to filter out the thumping sounds in my mixes. And then the guy bought this building next door, which was the Yiddish library, and he had to completely like strip it down and build it back up again.
Oh, wow.
He didn't know that was going to happen until he got in there and started doing it. So I'd be working, and these bandsaws would be going. And,
oh, jeez.
and I was like, I gotta move. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
Around that time, when I realized I really had to move, I went to Hong Kong to do a couple nights at Festival Hall with Budgie, Mabi, and Sugizo.
Okay.
And Leonard Ito, who was the Kodo drummer that was out with us on the Dream Show.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And it was so awesome. It was just a really, really great experience, great shows. And Budgie had just moved to Berlin, and his wife had come to visit, see the shows. She grew up in Hong Kong. And so they were talking about, Berlin as being this great place and all this and that. And so the gig was over. I went home and I actually got depressed where I was living. Nothing was really interesting going on in New York. And I couldn't think of where I wanted to move in New York. Yeah. My kid was already grown up. And so I was on the phone with Budgie, and he said, you should come to Berlin. And you should come stay with us. And I'm like, but you just had a baby. It's like 5 or 6 months old.
Wow.
Who invites someone to stay with them indefinitely who's just had a baby? And his wife got on the phone and talked me into it. So I gave them notice where I was living. I threw away storage, packed up, sold, and got myself down to a guitar, a backpack, a computer, and an iPad, and a suitcase. Oh, wow. And I purposely left behind what was left of my rack mount gear that I wanted to keep, which was really much the repeater and the 2290. Okay. And again, kept the pedals that I wanted to keep. But I decided I was going to go to Berlin, and I'm just going to focus on the iPad and the computer. And around that time, they were making these apps that worked in the iPad in class compliant mode. So you could hook your iPad up to an interface and use the audio drivers in the interface rather than the Mac drivers. And I had a friend who was really keen on all this stuff and sort of pushed me towards that. And around that time, I was dabbling with Max MSP and Jetter, and I was making these patches for visual stuff and audio stuff, and it was just it was a lot. It was too much. But once I got into using these apps, I found I was able to quickly make music with them. So I went and I moved in with those guys, and I just eventually I got my own apartment a couple months later. But I just spent 2 years there, just digging in deep with these iPad apps. Wow. And learning Ableton Live. Oh, okay. And created pretty much the nucleus of what I do now. So I have one question that came to me as we're talking about this. You mentioned you're working with Susie and with Cyndi Lauper. Those kind of higher profile gigs, are those ones that are they're seeking you out, or are you going and finding those gigs? I was never very proactive finding stuff. Budgie called me for the Banshees. He called me and he said, hey, look, you were recommended to us by somebody. I think it was Reeves Gabrel. Oh. And it was either Reeves, and then there also was this other guy, Charlie Roth. this keyboard player, and there's I don't know who it was, but she called me up, and he described the project, and he asked me to send them some of my stuff, and I made this comp cassette and sent it to them. In the meantime, they sent me their record, The Rapture, and it was really funny because I listened to The Rapture, and there was all this stylized playing on it. It was very similar to with John McKay. Is that his name? The guy who was before me in the Banshees.
Oh, okay.
John Kay, John McGeoch, I feel terrible that I don't remember it. Great guitar player.
Looking it up right now here.
Yes. Anyway, I was surprised. I listened to it. I said, "Oh my God, this is like the stuff I sent them." and then Budgie called me. He goes, "Hey, look, your stuff sounds like you'd fit right in." Steve Severance was a fan of the Banshees. Had seen me play with them in London, so he was really keen on it. So they were in town doing a promotional tour, and they asked to meet with me. And at the end of the meeting, they were like, "Well, your name isn't John," because there's a whole list of Johns, right?
John Klein.
John Klein, that's it. John Klein. There's John Carruthers, John McGeoch, John Kay. I said, "Your name's not John. You got the gig." Yeah. So yeah, that was it. Now the Cyndi was a different story. Cyndi was I was good friends with Sammy Marandino. I still am, and I met him around the Darden Smith days because he was doing programming on that album, Little Victories, which is early '90s, and we had stayed in touch and we had done stuff together. And he called me up. It was probably around 2009 or so. Probably about 1999, he called me up. And he's like, "Hey, I'm in here. I'm recording Cyndi in my studio over in the Meatpacking District. And I hear what you do on this record, and Cyndi's open to it. So would you come in?" I said, "Sure." And I had my rack mount with my looping stuff and 2290 and H3000 and some pedals, and I brought a cello and I brought a guitar. And we got in there and we waiting, and she didn't show. And so Sammy goes, "Okay, let me put the tracks up and you can have a go at it." So I put them up and I started doing just my thing on them. Yeah. What I heard would, if anything, lift the track a little bit or add something to it. And, after a while we stopped and we're talking, and then Cyndi walks in about 2 hours later. And she's like, "Buddy, pal! Oh my God!" She could never use my name. I was always Buddy Pal. I just figured she couldn't remember it. Yeah. And she thought because I did such weird stuff that she knew my father was a scientist, but she thought he was like some kind of space scientist. Oh. She was. My dad was a neurophysiologist. But she was convinced he was a space scientist. Like she met him, and I think it's the first thing. "Oh, so you study space?" Yeah. Well, my dad kind of looked at her. So anyway, Sammy goes, "Oh, you should listen to what Knox did. It's really great." And she just blew up on him right in front of me. First time meeting her, she just ripped him another asshole. "Oh my God. How dare you touch my music? I'm the producer. This is my music. Blah, blah, blah. I know exactly what I want him to play." Wow. So I went in and did exactly what she wanted me to play, obviously putting my touch on it. Yeah. And then Sammy and I had a gig that night over at the CBGB's canteen. And she shows up. And she starts heckling me. Oh my God. Yeah, I take a solo. "Yeah, Knox, you go, Knox." And I'm like, either she hates me or she loves me. I don't know what's going on with this woman, but I'll never hear from her again. I was convinced. And the thing that shocked me was she's exactly like she is. Oh. I mean, that is who, all the time. That's who she is, that person. Oh my God. All the time. And I got to know her pretty well. That is amazing. So anyway, I walk away from that, and And I'm just going, that was the craziest thing ever. I don't know what that was. I'll probably never hear from her again. And it was about maybe 2 weeks later, I'm in a session with Victor Van Vogt, and my phone is blowing up. And I'm ignoring it, because I'm working. I got the guitar on and everything.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God, it's probably my kid's school. That's what happens. The kid gets sick, they call the parents.
Right, yeah.
And so I answer it, and it's like, hey, buddy, pal, it's Sid. I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, we're mixing those tracks that we did the other day, and there's all this other stuff on there. Sammy hadn't wiped the tracks.
Oh.
So all of a sudden the engineer's pulling up all this stuff, and she goes, this stuff is amazing. You got to do my record. You got to do the rest of the record with me. Plus, I want to fly you out to LA this weekend to do this TV show. And, that was the beginning of that.
Wow.
Yeah. So thank you, Sammy, for not erasing.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, during that whole period with that Shine record and whatnot, it was pretty experimental for popular music. I mean, I was playing with a Chaos pad. I was looping all sorts of weird stuff like the accordion, and doing all this weird pitch shifting with the cello, and it just sort of glued everything together in a weird kind of way. And that just progressed for the years, and by the end of it was, bashing out a couple cowboy chords and singing Girls Just Want to Have Fun. but I don't regret it. It was good. It was a very good experience.
Oh, that is awesome. Do you have another credit that I'm curious about? Because I got this album. It's the Closed Down Account of Rabies.
Hal Wilner.
I got that because of a few people, Jeff Buckley being the primary reason I wanted to buy it, but also hearing Christopher Walken do The Raven. But
yeah.
So you're on 2 tracks with Ed Sanders, To Helen and The Haunted Palace. Those are the only 2 live tracks, I believe, on that album. What was the situation with that?
We were all in the studio together and recorded live in the studio.
Okay.
Yeah, if it says live, that's what it means.
Okay, because I thought I heard like and maybe I'm mixing it up with one of the other tracks, but it sounds like there's an audience in there.
Not that there wasn't.
Okay.
When we did it. What's the name of that studio? It doesn't exist anymore, but they had like a tank with live tarantulas in there.
Oh wow!
and the whole studio was kind of looked like a spaceship.
Oh my god!
But I'm trying to remember who was on that. I think it might have been Greg Cohen. Is he on it?
Trying to look it up right now. It's only giving me
Ben Paraski, Steve Bernstein.
I think Steve Bernstein. Oh, here we go. I got a better link here. So To Helen, it's Greg Cohen, Ben Prowski, Martin Brumbach, Tim Conklin, Steve Bernstein, and Ed Sanders. Yeah.
That's a Hal Wilner thing. Hal pulled me in a lot of his shows, which were just completely chaotic and absolutely wonderful. I mean, it was just like that was the Hal Wilner thing. He wanted to create chaos and have some music come out of it. That would not normally happen. I mean, the last thing I did with him was for the Mark Bolan album. What was that called? Something Hipster.
Oh,
it came out a couple of years ago. It came out after Hal passed away.
Oh God, yeah, I can't remember that. I know which one you're talking about, but I don't remember the name of it.
And he called me up. I was in Berlin. He said, "I'm coming to Berlin. I'm going to do one of these Bolan tracks with Peaches, and I want to bring you in on it." She's got a demo that's very electronic. Then I want guitar in there, and so he came to town. We met with Peaches. We listened to her track. We talked. She was, it was a great electronic track she came up with. It was really good. But she was open to doing the Hal thing. And so we brought in, I brought in Budgie. I booked a studio. I brought in Budgie. And because they knew each other, I figured at least that would be comfortable.
Yeah.
And we started working on that. And Hal had specific ideas what he wanted. We brought in Renaud Pion, the reed player, and Hal would be like, "Oh, play like some raw or something. So play some of that shit." And she was not having it. And then we were trying to bash some stuff out with Budgie, and she wasn't really having it either. And I had the idea. I said, "Okay, let's call the studio and get stems of the electronic stuff she did." And some of the electronic drums especially, and then have Budgie and myself play to it. And that's when it all clicked. Oh. But I was like the middle guy. I was going from Hal to Peaches and Peaches to Hal and Hal to Peaches. They weren't, and Hal had this one idea and Peaches didn't like it. And Peaches said, it was very funny because they both are very different. And their aesthetic, and that's part of what Hal loves, is getting that aesthetic, those two things colliding, and it was great. At the end of it, we're walking out of the studio, and Peaches has her arm around Hal, and goes, "Oh, Hal, thank you for making a record with me that I would never make for myself."
Oh, that's awesome.
And Hal just went, "And we'll never do it again."
Life is the same and it always will be. Easy as picking foxes from a tree. But I can't get no satisfaction. All I want is easy action. A stud is a lamb with the thoughts of a tiger. He moves like a cat, knows how to ride her. But I can't get no satisfaction. All I want is easy action.
I just looked at an angel-headed hipster.
That's it.
Oh, man. So
my memory's shot.
Well, mine's not too far behind.
But I did remember Ben Porowski and Greg Cohen.
Yeah, you did. Well, I did not. But see, you've done a few things in the past few years that are incredibly interesting. And I haven't heard... Yeah, I've heard it. I think it's a live track from the Bursting Blue Bone Bark you did with Eric Mingus.
Yes,
that's wild.
Yes, there's a whole album that I'm sitting on that we're going to put out.
Oh,
probably on my label Blue Elastic. Eric, it's primarily me and Eric. And we've been working together. We've done a bunch of shows and recording. And I spoke to him just the other day about really starting this stuff. He's in New Mexico now.
Okay.
But it all started when he was living in New Jersey. And I was living in Berlin. He was over with Elliot Sharp. And he came by my place for a day. And I just put up a microphone and said, let's just do something. And I started playing one of my sound ribbons. And he started just, improvising. And it was just brilliant. Oh. And that sort of started this whole thing. And then later we brought in this drummer, Earl Harvin, who lives in Berlin. And he's on a couple of the tracks on the record. No, that's a special project. It really is.
Well,
Eric's amazing.
So the one snippet that I found on YouTube, it sounds incredible. I'm excited to hear that. So.
Yeah. He then from New Jersey moved to Ireland.
Oh,
Coming over to Berlin a little bit. Then he moved back to New Jersey. Then he moved to Arizona, and then he moved to upstate New York, and then he moved to New Mexico.
Oh my gosh! So he'll be back in New Jersey in a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean it's really the distance that keeps us apart.
You've got a new album, which is really, really, the music in it is sublime. I've fallen in love with this.
Oh, thank you.
But I thought it was your first solo release. But I don't know if it's classified as that because I did see an album called Turquoise.
Yes, and that's an album that I did in 2005. It's a solo thing, but I never released it.
Okay.
I sold it on my website and gave it to friends. It was, you know what it was? I was coming off of and I forget who it was. I was coming off of, I was coming off of working with Cyndi, David, and Susie all at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, I just have to do something that's just me. And it's a good record, and I will release it eventually, re-release it, release it. But it never really properly came out.
Is it similar in vein to the sound, or is it different?
It's the same aesthetic. I think you would hear how it connects to it. It's I think the sound, in my opinion, is much more connected to where I'm at today than Turquoise was where I was at then. Plus, I've had all this experience exploring myself in my art with the instruments, and as well as just having a firmer grip on who I am and what I have to say. I think the sound is very much the truth to who I am. Maybe a little bit more than Turquoise is. And it's also the whole idea of creating these pieces that are all based on guitar. I mean, there's no synthesizers or samples on the record. The sound. It's all guitar, and I play upright bass and I play some percussion. But the rest is guitar. And it's on the heels of my friend Peter Freeman's death. He was pushing me to do a guitar album. And he and Rick Cox and I he put an album. The album came out after he passed away that Rick Cox and I were working on with him. Oh, okay. And I did another record that hasn't been released called Sea of Stars, which isn't what I call a guitar album, which I'm very pleased with, very proud of. I thought that's what I was going to come back to the States and release. But I had a hard time connecting to it because I was also trying to sort of visually see what it was going to be. And because I was new to living in the country, I was very short of inspiration. I was so used to being in a city and that energy that I really forced myself to get outside and start exploring this area of Long Island Sound, which we call the Sound. And it wasn't really until I got outside and experienced the fishing, mostly the fly fishing, where I'd spend like about 7 hours in a row nonstop in the middle of a river. Oh, wow! Just totally engulfed in fly fishing and trying to get this fly just to sit perfectly in the bait stream and not cause it to be nudged or cause the line to direct it in any other way. Oh, you did get into it. Wow. And then experiencing, I was out today for a couple hours, and it's this thing where you're really having to follow the rhythm of the bait stream, even though other parts of the river aren't on the same rhythm. Okay. And then if you're in the water, you can also often feel how it's pushing you in a different direction necessarily than the actual bait line is going. And so you're getting these different shifts of rhythm within the actual body of water that's moving in the same direction. Oh, wow. And that had a profound effect on my writing, by creating these sound rhythms. And that was the beginning of the project, because at the same time, I was trying to make these paintings for Sea of Stars and not connecting. But I was falling into this other thing, which was very much connected to the feelings and the visuals I'd get from being out night fishing on the Sound or fishing in the rivers, fly fishing, or hiking in the woods, or just exploring this area that I had been out of touch with for 50 years or so. Wow. And things just started flooding my journal writing, there's a lot of that in the book. Yeah. Very abstract, but very much about being in the moment, whether it's hiking on a trail or sitting by the water at night or whatever the case may be. It was connecting to the photographs, connecting to the sketches, connecting to the paintings, and it all felt like it just was simultaneously writing along the wave of the record. And I didn't know it was going to be a book until about halfway through recording.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I was like, you know what? This is, because it all felt like this weird like memoir of the past 3 years. I mean, I was my caretaker for my mother for the first 2 years I was here. And then for the past year, she moved into a facility. So that's when everything sort of opened up, and I was like, this all sort of naturally comes together as one. And then from then, I was a little more focused on like how the art specific pieces fit with the with each piece in the record. Okay. And how the writing was all simultaneously blended in there too, and sketches and there are photos of like the land around here and my workspace and so I figured it's basically documenting this musical journal from the past 3 years.
See, you mentioned a couple times sound ribbons. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, that's what I fell into that term. I mean, they're soundscapes. Okay. But I came up with some liminal space for it. The concept of it is it's all in real time, and there's no pre-existing audio. Okay. There's no synths and no samples. So they're basically improvisations. Okay. But I go into it with the composer's head, trying to compose. So it's almost the same theory that quite often when you do a first take on a session, many ways somehow that might be your best take. Yes, because it just comes from nothing. It comes from like, hopefully, and later I realized if I'm open, it's like some kind of weird channeling from something out there, and I mean, of course, it might not be even though it might be the best take, it might not be the right take for working with somebody else. Right. But quite often for myself, I think a lot of the stuff on there is like first take stuff, just because I feel it's a gift. And you get this thing and you don't really know what it is, don't really understand what it is, and it might be chaotic. And then I'm there to try to grab some of it. And some of it feels like it sort of floats like a ribbon, and sometimes that ribbon wraps around something. And that thing that it wraps around as an identity, and that's what I try to shape and massage into something that I hear in there that has somehow some effect on me. Okay. It could be just simple. It could be simple as some harmony of it, or it could be just how it evokes a feeling in me. And within that space, I try to create these tensions and releases. Try to create contrasts, to create something that's relatively interesting, that has some kind of voice. Right. And so I started doing that stuff I started designing all this stuff in Berlin and started going out and doing these live shows with it. Okay. And then I decided, well, along with it, I really want to do the same thing visually. So I got another iPad and started putting some of my little film clips in there that I could process together and mix them together and process the whole thing. Oh, wow. So it's almost like I'm creating these collages with the audio and collages with the visual and trying to connect them together at the same time while doing a live performance. So the thing is, every single performance, or even if I'm not using visuals, I'm recording, I'm always, even though I have a slight understanding of what it's going to be or what possibly I'd like it to be or what it should feel like or have some premonitions about it, I'm open to it just creating a life of its own. Okay. And then the challenge is to make it work. And then from that, I try to get to a point where I'm not even thinking about it. I'm in it. I'm lost in it. And that's sort of where I would like the listener to go. I like somehow the listener to be taken somewhere to get lost in it. So there's a lot of, on the record, there's some subtleties in there, some areas where, you might have to listen to it more than once to really get it. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's very... Yeah, very complex, very dense in areas. Like I love before the outflow.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite on the whole album is Mars on a Half Moon Rising.
Okay, that's an interesting piece.
There's so much in that.
The story behind that is it's dedicated to Morris Williams, who passed away about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
We were very, very close, and I was very close during the whole process. Actually, I was with him when he got really sick in the beginning, and then we were on tour doing the Albert Ayler Christmas thing.
Oh, okay.
So that's an homage to him, and then Branch is an homage to Jamie Branch, who at one time was playing with us, who passed away.
Oh, wow.
I mean, in the credits, I mean, it's dedicated to these people, these musicians that had a huge effect on me musically. I live right on this pond. Actually, the back. This goes out into a back porch, wraparound porch that's screened in, and there's a pond there, and it just gets so much wildlife, all different kinds of birds and animals and frogs, a lot of frogs, like all different kinds of frogs.
Okay.
And so I had this little field recorder, and I was out there recording this what sounded like a symphony of frogs, and I probably record about 5 to 10 minutes of this, and I would just listen to it, and I couldn't believe what they were doing. It sounded incredibly composed to me.
Oh, wow.
And it had all these really all this counterpoint rhythms and all this. It's just magnificent. And I was like, I gotta, and I played it for a friend of mine. She said, "Oh, you should have an album of this stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, but I really want to. I really want it to be on my album. I really want to turn it into something." And so I started. Just the first take of a sound ribbon on it, and the whole thing just opened up.
Wow.
And so I started listening to this with the sound ribbon in there. And it's been a bit after Mars had passed away, and I was just I missed him every day.
Yeah.
And I started playing this melody on the acoustic guitar to it, and it's sort of it's something I don't think it's anything that Mars would actually come up with or play, but for me it touched at a heartstring that was connected to Mars. And so it's the one thing I actually wrote out, as well as some harmony stuff. And then I put some upright bass in there and some percussion, and then just it sort of composed itself.
This release, it's got the visual aspect as well as the musical aspect. So paintings, photos. Have you always been a visual artist as well as a musician?
Well, my mother's an artist, and so I grew up, having art lessons, and was always playing always doing artwork. And then by the time I got to college, in the beginning, I was a split major. I was studying painting and music.
Right.
But by the time I got to my senior year, I had to drop the painting because I had to focus just on. I had a choice, either do painting or do music, and I chose music because that's always been my passion.
Yeah.
And then over the years, I've been dabbling in it here and there, but it really wasn't until I moved to Berlin I started painting again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I've always sketched and made, have these art books where I do stuff in and.
Keeping the skills sharp.
I don't, the thing about the book is I don't consider myself a photographer. I don't consider myself really an artist. I don't consider myself a writer. The whole point of it is that it is just who I am at the moment when making this record. And I think it really works. For me, I think it's very good. And that's hard for me to say. But the reason it's very good is because it's exactly who I am. I'm not trying to be anybody or follow any style or anything. Yeah. And the process of the book is the same as the process that I deal with making the record. There's things where I go in and I play around in design with the photographs and creating collages with that and some of the sketches I do. And to me, it's almost the same. It is exactly the same approach that I have with whatever I'm doing with these sound ribbons. I'm taking a very natural tone and I'm digitizing it. And through that process, I'm trying to make the electronic part of it sound organic and natural. That's what I'm trying to do with all of this is, use technology to express nature.
I think the album is a triumph with that. It sounds incredible. I absolutely love it. Where can people find it? How can they get a hold of it?
Okay, it's coming out May 30th. Okay. And it will be streamed on all the, Spotify, Apple, all of them, Amazon. There's a whole list of them. I'm also releasing it on my Bandcamp, Knox Chandler Bandcamp. Okay. And that's where you can buy the book.
Excellent.
And then you'll get like a download code in the book. Inside the book cover, there's a download code. Oh, cool. And I probably will sell it on my website and possibly Spotify too. Okay.
Is there a social media presence that people can follow you and find out more information?
Yeah, Knox Chandler at Instagram, Knox Chandler at Facebook. I post a lot of stuff there. Okay. Knox Chandler video, YouTube. I have a couple. The two singles, one of them's Mars on a Half Moon Rising, and the other one is Tea-Stained Edge. They're full-length videos up there of those that I've made.
Yes, I saw those. Those are awesome.
And then I'm also Knox Chandler Music TikTok.
Oh, okay. Oh, man, you took the plunge into TikTok, eh?
Yeah, I dipped my toe in there, I should say. Let's see what the temperature's like.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. The stories are amazing, and I love the album. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. And I did forget one thing. Do you play out much anymore? Are you planning on playing anything like this live in the near future?
But when I do my live performances, I mean, this is when I do my live performances, I'm doing the sound ribbon thing. Mm-hmm. Right, which is the nucleus of every single piece on this record. Right, and I do it by myself with my visuals. I was in February. I was in Berlin. I did 3 there. I did one about 2 or 3 weeks ago in New Haven. I have some coming up this summer. But I'm also playing. I'm playing on Sunday with the New Haven Improvisers Collective. Oh no, I'm playing with Bob Gorey and Peter Riccio, doing one of those performances with them. It's not the New Haven Improvisers Collective, but I was hoping to get more gigs. I put some feelers out there, and it seems to be kind of difficult finding gigs, especially for this. Like I saw one place that I was told would be good, and it's just not the right place for it. But I figure once the record is out, I'll be a little more proactive. Okay. And that way, be able to get more of the gigs that I want to do.
Excellent. Well, if you ever make your way down to DC, let me know, because I would love to see this stuff.
I'd like to. Maybe you can recommend some places to look at.
There's a ton of places to play in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. I'll be happy to recommend a bunch of them to you.
Well, shoot. Text me your info.
You got it.